Enjoy the
Where we
video.
last left off, Izuku had thought that he had a decent grip on his Dino situation, but even after an emotional conversation with Todoroki and helping him understand that his powers is his own, Izuku went full Dino and won the fight, but in the end he lost control. He ended up injuring a lot of heroes, and Suyu Asui, just call her Sue, she was able to calm Izuku down, but in the end, Izuku was sedated and he woke up in a strange place. We pick up where we left off. "Where am I?" said Izuku. Suddenly, Izuku heard a voice through what sounded like an intercom. "Izuku Midoriya?" Who is that? Where are you? What is this place?" The voice continues. "Calm down. You are in a very secured vicinity. We brought you here after your little outburst, if you may." Suddenly, a secret hatch from above opens up from the ceiling, and a very large TV screen reveals itself. It then powers on, and it shows the news of Izuku's outburst. Many heroes were hospitalized, and Mount Lady had to have her leg amputated because of Izuku's aseptic bite badly infected it. The voice on the intercom says, "As you see, Izuku, you're a very dangerous man. So, we decided to bring you here." Izuku at that moment is having a crisis. I did all that? "I'm afraid so, Izuku." Izuku starts pacing back and forth. His mind is running 1,000 miles per hour. His head was aching, and he couldn't even look at himself in the mirror that was mounted on the wall, for he didn't even know who that was anymore. And in a fit of rage, Izuku then punches the nearest wall that was near him, leaving a very large dent. Suddenly, 4 large speakers then lowered from the secret hatches from the ceilings above. And they let out a very loud sonic blast at Izuku, putting him in great pain. Izuku falls to the ground, desperately trying to cover out the sound, but the sound was just too great to block out. And as his ears began to bleed, that's when the speakers had stopped. Izuku continues to wallow on the ground as he continuously covers his ears, just rolling on the ground, complaining of the pain that was inflicted on him. "Izuku Midoriya, for our safety, as well as yours, if there ever is the slightest chance of you losing control again, a show of force will be put up front. So, do not shout, do not lash out, and most importantly, do not lose control. Do we understand each other, Izuku?" Izuku, still rattled by the attack. "Izuku?" "Yes?" "Do we understand each other?" "I understand." "Good. Welcome to the Public Safety Commission." A few hours later, the steel door that was keeping Izuku contained opened, and the voice instructs Izuku to walk outside and to allow the men to escort him to a specific room. When Izuku went outside, there were 2 armed men wearing heavy-duty vests to protect their bodies, and Izuku was instructed to walk. As they walked for what felt like a minute, they soon came across a room that had what appeared to be a metallic chair. Next to it was a rack of many blades, and overhead was a surgical light. What are we doing here?" asked Izuku. It was an eerie silence for a few moments, until one of the guards spoke up. "Get in the chair." Izuku has seen enough horror films to know where this is going. He was completely still until one of the guards used their gun to push Izuku forward, demanding that he sits down. Sweat began to rush down Izuku's forehead, and he breathes heavily. And soon, He sits down in the chair. Suddenly, his arms and legs were restrained by some metallic gears that just popped out of the chair. A man wearing a white coat and says that he, along with others, will be conducting experiments on him to thoroughly understand his power. He picks up a scalpel and brings it closer to Izuku's chest. He loses control as Izuku yells, "No! Please stop!" And then he goes Dino. He turns into his dinosaur form as all of his weight begins to cave in on the chair and the metal bends, and the doctor quickly runs to the corner of the room, and as he runs to the corner of the room, he quickly grabs some specialized earmuffs along with the security guards, activated a specific setting on their helmets to block out the sonic sounds that incapacitated Izuku, causing him great pain and made him pass out. The doctor takes notes, saying that his quirk response is through his emotions. Feeling extreme cases of fear, stress, or anger, perhaps he could be even powerful. And so, for the past few weeks, the PSC would be doing horrendous experiments on Izuku, trying to understand his power and even weaponizing it. They're trying to weaponize his dinosaur transformation so that others can perhaps transform just like him and maybe even copy that little electricity thing he can do, which is full cowling, we all know. But unfortunately, they won't be able to copy that. But his DNA was just so complex that it would take many years to thoroughly understand what is going on with this kid. What they don't know was that every time that Izuku transformed, he would lose more and more of his humanity. It's just a matter of time before there will be no more Izuku, only the Tyrannosaurus Rex. One day, the PSC, Public Safety Commission, for short, decided to skip experiments and let Izuku meet the others. Wait, there's other people here? Said Izuku. Izuku was then escorted to what appears to be a cafeteria filled with other kids that almost seemed the same age as him. He was instructed to grab a tray and to take a seat. His food would be brought to him shortly. Izuku sat at a table filled with other subjects. Izuku would feel the coldness of the metallic seat, and he tries to take his mind off of it by trying to start a conversation with the other people at the table. He looks over to his left and he sees a boy with yellow hair, and his hairstyle was like that of a mohawk, but down that mohawk stream was long dreadlocks that almost reached the back of his torso. His skin color was that of African American, and he had bright blue eyes. "So, how long have you been here?" The dreadlock boy said nothing as he turned his head towards Izuku and then back to the table. Izuku knew things were getting awkward, so he decided to try again, but before he could get the words out of his mouth, his tray was filled with what appears to be mush. Ugh. As the mush landed on his tray, some of the mush splattered onto his face. He was then told to eat up, and from the looks of this strange food, he had no intention of eating it. This horrendous goo, which led to things feeling more awkward when other people ate it as if they really had no other choice but to. Izuku then hears the sound of a metal spoon hitting the floor, and he looks to his left and he sees that the boy with the yellow dreadlocks had dropped his fork. He then reaches down into his shoe area and he pulls out a note and he hands it to Izuku. Izuku unfolds it and he reads what's inside. It said, "This is another test." It takes Izuku a few seconds to understand, but suddenly he heard a weird sound overhead, and it is at that point Izuku now understand what's going on. For when he looked up, almost everyone was having their eyes on him. His heart started beating fast and his brain giving him adrenaline in case of, well, he thought was going to happen really was going to happen. Almost everyone stood up staring at Izuku like a group of men and women on a mission. Izuku slowly gets up. "Look, I don't want any trouble." One of them speaks up. "We don't really have a choice. The people of this hellhole said that if we could take care of you, we would be free from this place." Izuku tries to talk them out of it, but out of nowhere, Izuku was then put in a headlock and then brought to the floor. Soon, he is surrounded, and everyone starts pummeling him. They start punching him, stomping on him. Some of them use their quirks on him. Like, one guy had a fist of stone, a girl uses plasma whips, burning his skin, and someone used their laser eyes and burned half of his hair away. One used metal bending, and one person even was trying to mess with his psyche and instantly began to regret it. For that person saw Izuku's inner self. The person then started yelling for everyone to stop and yells at them that they're all going to die. But they kept going. They were relentlessly beating on Izuku, trying to kill him. Izuku, who is still conscious, is watching everything that is happening. These people just beating on him brought him back to the time when he was a kid being bullied for being, well, not different from everyone. This moment took him back to that day when Katsuki, Bakugo, and his gang beat him up because he was trying to protect another kid. He never could quite understand why would his childhood friend just be so mean to him and just hurt other people just because they're underneath him? Is that why? Why does my life have to be so unfair? It was one faithful day that the doctors told me that I couldn't be a hero because I had no quirk. But it only took one faithful day to change all of that when I saved a little girl from drowning, and then I was able to transform and gain All Might's power. I've tried so hard to come so far, but even after getting a quirk, taking on an army of villains, protecting my classmates, my life continues to be crap. I've had enough of this. I just want to let go. Back in the real world, Izuku's eyes turned a bloodshot red, his claws extended out from his fingertips, his teeth became razor sharp, with green electricity surfacing throughout his body. Izuku was ready to let go of his humanity that he had left. Then suddenly, a yellow light occurred from the right side of Izuku, and everyone started to back up off of him, freeing him from his headlock. Izuku then saw the guy he tried to engage with step in front of him, with his arms emitting a yellow glow, with what appears to be the light shaping into yellow meat cleavers. They were very large, almost bigger than his body. This man was yelling at everyone to leave him alone. They all back off, and one of the inmates said, "Kane, what are you doing? This is our chance to get out of here." The man, now known as Kane, said, "You're all willing to murder someone? You should know that the clothes that these bastards put on our backs ain't even worth the promise." If you're actually okay with taking a life, then you deserve to be here more than anyone. Other inmates step forward, saying things like, I don't care whose life I have to take. All that matters is that I get out of here. My sister is out there all alone, and God knows what's happening to her. If taking a life is what it takes to get out of here, then that's just what I'm going to do. Suddenly, the boy's muscles start expanding outwards, taking the form of this giant hulking beast, and it lets out a war cry and it lunges at Kane, and Kane then leaps into the air and he swings his light cleavers at the man's head, leaving a deep gash across his face, just barely missing his eyes. The man then falls to the ground and he wallows in pain. Izuku watches, and he is astonished that someone is actually protecting him for once. Thank God for that, because, as I mentioned before, Izuku was ready to give up. He was willing to say goodbye to his humanity and let the T-Rex take control of him from now on. And thanks to this man, named Kane, he practically saved his life. And his humanity, which unfortunately was hung by a thread thanks to this incident. But unfortunately, Izuku could not stop the Tyrannosaurus Rex that was coming out. Everyone looks at Izuku, and Kane turns around and he sees the mid-transformation. Izuku had fully transformed, and he lets out his roar that was almost deafening. And Dino Deku goes on a revenge rampage and attacks everyone who attacked him. The girl with her plasma whips, he caught her plasma whips in his mouth and started waving her around like a whip herself, hitting her against the ground and the walls, greatly injuring her. He would even go after the stone guy, the laser eye guy, the one person that attacked his psyche. All of them were on death's doorstep. Izuku was ready to go after everyone else, but then Kane stepped in between them and Dino Deku. Dino Deku then snarled and growled at Kane, but he remembers that he saved him. And it is at that moment Dino Deku is finally calmed down. Suddenly, the walls started changing, like they were extended out and aimed right at Dino Deku, and those walls then turned into monitors that had pictures of Sue on them. Seeing that caused great fear to build up in Dino Deku, and he purposely corners himself to get away from this frog girl that filled him with dread. And then, when he cornered himself, the walls then turned into a cage. And then Dino Deku was then taken away. He then woke up a few hours later in his inmate clothing. Izuku looks over and he realizes that he was behind bars and there was a man on the other side of the bars. Izuku gets up and says, "Why are you people doing this to me? And not just to me, to other people. Those other kids were practically my age." The man says, "Izuku, did you forget what happened at your school's festival? You defeated many pro heroes. And in one hit nonetheless, you are some special kid. And we need to harvest that power of yours. Not to mention, you are a carnivore after all, Izuku, and a most dangerous one nonetheless. You really think that after what happened, that the people of Japan, your friends, your family, will welcome you back with open arms? Mount Lady had to have her leg amputated because you badly infected it with your septic bite. You managed to defeat Endeavor with his intense flame and heat, and broke every bone in his body. Heck, you even bashed All Might so badly that he started spitting out his own blood." Izuku thinks to himself, well, he was already doing that before, but... The man then said, "I'm sorry, Izuku, but this is your home now." Izuku said, "I've been telling you since the day that I got here I can control the dinosaur within me. If you just let me speak to All Might, like bring him to me and I can control it." "And what will that do exactly?" said the man. Izuku looks to the ground and says, "I can't tell you. And that is why we cannot make it happen. If you don't cooperate, we won't either." He then gets up and he leaves the room, and Izuku is left alone with his thoughts. Back at Izuku's hometown, his classmates gather at the UA library, all of them sitting still in shock of what happened at the UA Sports Festival, all of them sad about the absence of their friend Izuku. Ever since that day, they could not get Izuku out of their heads, not to mention the strongest heroes were taken down by Dino Deku, and their Jurassic classmate had lost control, not to mention he also put a dent on UA High's name because of Z outbursts. As they sit there in silence, Katsuki Bakugo is the one to break it. I've never seen him so angry before. Before he got his quirk, he would always be so scared around me. But now, Bakugo gets a flashback when Izuku went berserk, and then back to reality. It's like he's a whole new person. And those men, another flashback ensues, where men in heavy-duty vest, armor, and guns came in and took Izuku away. The flashback ends. Who the hell were those men? Kirishima speaks up. "I heard a rumor that those group of armed men that took Midoriya were called the Public Safety Commission." "What's that?" asked Uraraka. "It's a group of people that take certain people, they experiment on them, and they train them to be mindless soldiers, weapons. A secret governmental vicinity nonetheless." Uraraka says, "Hey, Sue, how did you manage to calm Midoriya down?" I don't know, Ochako. It's just, I looked into his eyes and I saw fear." Sue remembers the look in Izuku's eyes when she brought him back. She remembered looking at his face and when he was confused and scared after the outburst, and when he was taken out by the tranquilizer, and him being snatched out of her arms. And Kaminari stands up, saying, "Come on, guys, we're not just gonna sit here and mope around, are we? We need to do something, at least find out where Izuku is and make sure he's okay." Ida stands up, saying, "Mr. Kaminari, we were already informed by Mr. Aizawa to let the school take care of this, and that it's none of our business." "I don't care! Izuku is our classmate. He's our friend. And he's been missing for the past 3 months. He's out there, somewhere with God knows what's happening to him. Heck, even Mrs. Midoriya, his mom, has been trying even harder to find out what happened to her son than UA has ever done. But they just keep brushing her aside. And now, she even has a group of her own, trying to find out more about the whereabouts of her son. And if I just sit here and do nothing, then I can never look at myself in the mirror again, knowing that I could have done something." It's quiet for a moment, and then Todoroki stands up from his chair and says, "I'm with you, Kaminari." "Me too," said Kirishima. "I'm with you too," said Shoji. And soon, everyone is standing up and is dedicated to find out the whereabouts of their friend. And soon, they were accompanied by 6 people. The original Dino Squad, and their leader, Miss Moynihan. She speaks. Excuse me, but did you mention Izuku Midoriya?" Bakugo says, "Yeah, who's asking?" Miss Moynihan turns to her group and translate in English of what Bakugo just said, because, he speaks Japanese, and only Miss Moynihan and Buzz know Japanese. She tells them what Bakugo said, and they look at them with a big smile on their face, and they turn to their first form of their dinosaurs, with Max with his red eyes and his claws and sharp teeth like Izuku. Fiona Fiona with her yellow eyes and her Spinosaurus spine extended out from her back. Buzz with his wings extended out from his arms, and Caruso and his skin turning blue, showing off his Stegosaurus plates on his back. And Roger, showing off his Triceratop horns. They all stare in amazement. Some gasps, some can't believe what they were seeing, that being Bakugo. Miss Moynihan says, "We are just like him, but we fear that he might be in danger with an old nemesis of ours, and you all knew Izuku the best. Therefore, we may need your help." Back at Izuku, he's lost track of how long he's been there. His sanity was still being hung by a thread, but that one moment, that act of random kindness, kept him from submitting when Kane saved his life. So, for the past few days, after every test, Izuku would sit there in the corner of his cell, hugging his knees up to his chest, rocking back and forth. It won't be long. It wouldn't be so bad if the room wasn't so quiet, because when he has a quiet room, his thoughts are even louder in his head, like a trombone going off in his ear. His inner dinosaur trying to convince him to just give up and to let him have control, let him take the wheel. To which Izuku would scream out, "No, no, I will not give up." You're only delaying the inevitable. Delete that part. You're just a voice in my head. You're just a voice in my head. The voice says, "Stop fooling yourself. I am more of you than you can ever imagine. I'm your true identity. I'm the best part of you that's not afraid to fight back. Every moment that you held in your anger and took all those beatings from Bakugo or anyone who picked on you, because you were this little quirkless nobody. I was feeding and becoming stronger every day. And one faithful day, you wanted to play the hero and save a little girl from drowning in the ocean. That ooze was my salvation, my way out. And because of One for All, I am now stronger than ever. Every second you reject me is every second I grow stronger. It's only a matter of time before they push you, and it will only be me that's left." Suddenly, Izuku's door opens and Kane enters. "What are you doing here?" said Izuku. "Well, I just wanted to check on you, Izuku." "How do you know my name?" "The people told us, remember, when they attacked you?" Izuku says, "And what? Now people are allowed to visit me like I'm in a goddamn exhibit?" Kane says, "That's a strange way of thinking a man who's just saved your life." Izuku clears his throat and says, "Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry about that. And about your answer, yeah, I'm doing just hunky-dory, other than being cut open over and over again as I lie sleeping, and then waking up with excruciating pain. I'm doing just fine." "Okay, smartass." Izuku sighs and says, I'm sorry, I just don't understand. Why are they doing this? Because everything that they're doing, it's just breaking me down mentally. What person would allow this to happen to kids? To anyone? Kane then sits on the floor on the other side of the cell next to Izuku and says, "It's for power. You see, Nothing's better than controlling something people can't understand. And that's people like us, with great power, greater than all mights. Izuku thinks in his head, "You have no idea." Kane continues, "It's all about control. That's what these people want of us." Izuku says, "How long have you been here?" He chuckles. "I've been here for so long. Heck, I don't even know how old I am anymore. Heck, it's been so long since I've seen the sun. Sometimes I think I'm in my hundreds." They both laugh, and then Izuku asks Kane, "Why did he save him? You could have had a chance of leaving this place, so to see the sun. So why ruin your chances to get out of here? Just to save one person." Kane turns his head to Izuku and says something he'd never thought he'd hear anyone say to him before. Because it's the right thing to do. Izuku smiles and says, "Thank you." And not to mention, these people lie. You never know when they're telling the truth or not. Which they never do, which is why I never trust them. Kane then looks at the camera that's mounted on the ceiling that's aimed right at them that had audio recording. And then Kane looks at Izuku, telling him to look at it to read his lips. His lips start moving, but no words were coming out. But then it only took Izuku a few seconds to know that he was saying the words, "We're going to break out of here." Izuku mouthed back the words, "How?" And then Kane slips him a piece of paper hopefully without the cameras noticing. He then stood up and then said, "See you later" to Izuku before leaving the room and closing the door. Izuku reads the note and it says, "You're our ticket out of this place. Just wait and you'll see your opportunity. Make sure the scientists don't get this note. Eat it if you have to." Izuku is excited and he takes a deep breath to keep himself together so that the people aren't suspicious of anything. We then cut back to Class 1A and the original Dino Squad. All of them are discussing what they have learned so far about Izuku's whereabouts. Class 1A tries to use Koji's quirk to use insects to gather information from the staff, but sadly nothing came up. They tried to ask around people of any sort of conspiracies about the PSC Foundation. Only a small group of people managed to tell them at least something. It wasn't much, but it was something. Heck, they even went to Mrs. Midoriya to see if her group or the press had learned anything at all. But sadly, whatever they knew, she knew, and that's about all they had. So, for a while, they just sat around and they were just thinking of ways to find him. And also, they really wanted to get to know the Dino Squad, asking them questions like, are they related to Izuku in some ways with his quirk to transform into a dinosaur? Buzz would say, we don't have any quirks. We're all quirkless. We were all genetically mutated thanks to Dr. Veloci's primordial ooze, just like Izuku. The classmates were confused. They thought this whole dinosaur thing was Izuku's quirk. If the dino thing is something of a chemical accident gone wrong, then what exactly is quote-unquote that strength enhancement quirk that Izuku mentioned? Buzz says, wait, Izuku didn't tell you that part? Oh, well, I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have said anything if he wanted that part to be a secret. Everyone can't stop thinking about it. But then, their thinking was interrupted when their teacher, Aizawa, entered the room. He then looks at the Dino Squad and then at his students. What's going on here? Ida stands up and announces that they are looking for Izuku since the school refuses to tell them anything and leave them in the dark. It's up to them, and they are going to succeed in their goal in finding their friend, whether Mr. Aizawa wants them to or not. It's quiet for a second, and everyone stands up. In Class 1A, they stand up, and the Dino Squad just follows them, showing how they are willing to stand against Aizawa and that they are ready for a fight against the school if he so wishes. "Why are we standing?" asked Fiona. "I have no idea," said Roger. It's quiet for a few moments, and then Aizawa walks over to the board that they had nearby, which had a few words written on it. He erases it, and he writes assortment of numbers, and he leaves the room, but not before saying, "You didn't get this from me." Bakugo walks over to the board. What are these numbers supposed to be?" Miss Moynihan and Yaoyorozu look closely at the numbers, and they both say at the same time, "It's coordinates! It's latitude and longitude!" They then began to do the latitude and longitude to figure out where these numbers lead. Back to Izuku, he was on an operating table with wires attached to parts of his body. Some were around his wrists, some were around his ankles, mostly of them were attached around his chest, but one was also wrapped around his head. All of these wires were attached to a machine. A doctor speaks in a voice that echoes off the walls. "So, Izuku, is there something you would like to tell me about your conversation that you had with PSC-114? Izuku is quiet. "Very well, then." Izuku was then met with a shock that went on for a few seconds. He then jolts out of pain and he breathes heavily. When it stops, the doctor says, "Izuku, I know you're smart enough to understand the downfalls of being struck with hefty amounts of volts. What you've just experienced was a small volt. Do you know what it's like to be struck with 25 millivolts? It tends to knock out people, but it also causes people to lose control of their bowels. But which volts beyond 50, it could cause irreversible damage to the human body. It could cause organ failure, mostly in the heart and in the brain. It could cause seizures. Sometimes you could even lose control of your breathing, like an asthma attack. And short-term memory loss, if I may add. So, how about we turn it up to 15 millivolts? Izuku doesn't say anything. He just takes a deep breath and he clenches his fists as the tip of his fingers turn into claws, and his claws dig into his skin, causing blood to seep out through his fingers. Very well then. He was then met with the painful shock, and this went on for a few seconds, and then light smoke started emanating from his body. The doctor does this again and again and again until he thinks Izuku's had enough. "Are you ready to talk now?" Izuku just lays there, breathing and shaking. "Izuku, is there something you want to tell me?" Izuku just stares at the doctor with hatred, and he slowly turns into his dino form, ready to attack. The doctor then turned the voltage up to 25 millivolts, and he turns it on, and it knocks Izuku out. Before things could get ugly, Izuku wakes up in his cell. He could still remember the feeling of being shocked. It is at this point that Izuku is starting to develop PTSD, and a few more days had passed. Back at Class 1A, they were able to figure out the coordinates, and they led to the driest desert. Yaoyorozu says, "These coordinates, it only leads to this desert." Miss Moynihan says, "There has to be more to it than this." Wasn't there a rumor that the vicinity is an underground base? What's to say that it's not underground in the desert somewhere? That is a strong possibility, said Yaoyorozu. "Here, I have an idea. Koji." She then asks Koji if he could conjure up a few cockatoos to observe the coordinates around this desert area of any strange activities. To which he obliged and he does what he's asked. While that was going on, most of Class 1A would ask the Dino Squad questions about their adventures and what they've been through and what exactly do they stand for. Like, what is it that they do? The squad, mostly Buzz, would go on to tell them about their adventures and all the animals that they have ever had to deal with. Heck, they even have a dog who goes by the name of Rump that could be a real troublemaker if he's not carefully looked after. And he goes on to tell them that they have fought mutant bees, mutant gorillas, and even mutant chickens. And also mention that they really try to not fight against the mutant creatures, but it's only when push comes to shove that they do. Roger also wants Buzz to tell them that they also stand for making the environment better and looking to prevent any more pollution and ways to reduce global warming, bringing green back into the earth basically. And also teaching people to support one another and to always be kind, yada yada yada. Ida will comment that they are doing an extraordinary thing and that if they're ever in need of any more people to join their group, he's willing to join in. Well, everyone wants to join in except for Bakugo. Todoroki, he just wants to try something new. Suddenly, Ida's phone rings and he takes the call outside, and it is at this moment that Ida was informed of his brother's horrendous injury. Ida drops his phone out of disbelief. He quickly ushers to the hospital without informing his classmates or the Dino Squad of where he was going. A few hours would pass, and they asked where Ida went and even tried to call his phone, but nobody picked up. Miss Moynihan said, "All right, children. It's probably best that you all get back to your class curriculum. As a professor, I'd hate for you all to flunk your grades." Most of them agreed to the idea, but most wanted to stay and keep up with their progress, but Miss Moynihan insisted. They all leave, and due to the incident that happened at the USJ Sports Festival, due to the incident that happened at the UA Sports Festival, internships were delayed for a while. A few days pass, and Ida would finally appear back in class, with most of his classmates being concerned about his well-being, but Ida would brush it off, saying that it's nothing, and that everything is fine. But they could tell that he was lying. Hoping to get more understanding from Ida, Yaoyorozu suggests to him that they regroup back at the meetup where they meet the Dino Squad at. To which Ida would deny it, and Yaoyorozu would also lie, saying to Ida that Koji has reports of the cockatoos, that they might have found something. And with that, it catches Ida's attention to at least look at it and make sure that it's true that there is some suspicious activities going on in the desert. Back at the library, it appears to be only the Dino Squad that was there. And Ida would ask Yaoyorozu where everyone else is, to which Yaoyorozu would be a bit of ashamed of herself for lying, saying that it's just the Dino Squad and us today. Ida, there's clearly something going on with you. You have this depressed aura surrounding you, and Ida cuts her off. So you lied to me. I do not have time for this. He starts stomping off, but then Miss Moynihan says, "Hold on now, Mr. Ida. When I spoke with Yaoyorozu, what she has mentioned intrigued me. Now, I'm not one to get into other people's business, but after hearing about your behavior, I must intervene. I may be a professor, but I also specialize in human behavior, and I could tell that something bad has happened. In your family, perhaps? Someone very close to you. I'm going to guess and say that it's a sibling." When she said that, she started reading Ida's movements and his body language, and she could tell that she was right. She then says, "Your brother is in critical condition, and he has a 50% chance of living." Ida starts crying and he falls to his knees. Yaoyorozu comforts him, and her comfortness is accompanied by the Dino Squad. When Ida calmed down, Yaoyorozu asked what happened, and Ida would go on to tell them everything about his brother Tensei in critical condition, and that the hero killer Stain was the culprit, and that he wants to get revenge for his brother, for if he dies, he wants him to die as well. Miss Moynihan speaks up, saying, "Ida, revenge is never the best solution to your problems. It will only lead to more disaster. And not to mention, you will be considered a bad guy yourself, and you will lose everything that you've worked so hard to achieve. And as an adult, I do not want that for you." Ida is silent for a few seconds and then says, "What do I do?" Miss Moynihan puts a hand on his shoulder and says, "You let the police and the pro-heroes do their jobs, and you pray that your brother makes it. Stay by his side while you still have him, because who knows, by tomorrow, you just might not." Ida then says, "Okay," as he walks off and leaves. A few hours will pass. It was dark. The lights were shining and the moon was glimmering its light over the city, and everything was dark, and everything was quiet. But that quietness was quickly filled with crashing cars, people screaming, and carnivorous roars of the abomination known as the Nomus. All of them having different abilities, from flying to fast to stronger, to some that were even logical thinkers. As the Dino Squad watches the news, their thoughts were wondering, where are the top 10 pro heroes when you needed them? But then they remembered that Izuku hospitalized all of them. Miss Moynihan steps forward, and then she turns to the Dino Squad and says, "Listen, everyone. I know we're in Japan, and it's not our place to intervene with these people's jobs. But right now is the perfect time to go out there and save lives. It's time to protect these people. It's time to stand up and fight." They all nod their heads and they run outside and they yell, "Go Dino!" They all change into their dinosaurs and they all usher to their opposition with the army of Nomus. Excuse me. Their fight went on for what felt like an hour, maybe two. And it appears that the Dino Squad is winning, but really, it's anyone's fight at this point. One by one, each of the squad was being overwhelmed. Max was getting dogpiled by a group of Nomus. Fiona was getting hit with a barrage of punches by Zed Nomus with strength enhancements. Caruso and Roger were being hit with a barrage of power attacks, such as energy beams and other elemental powers. And Buzz, who took to the sky, was flying, but then he was being surrounded by flying Nomus who were trying to take him down to the ground. One by one, they all start to panic. Fiona telepathically yells to her teammates, "Guys, I could use a little help." Buzz says, "You guys, I don't think I could keep going. I'm getting really tired and overwhelmed." "Yeah, me too," said Caruso. "Ugh, me three," said Roger. Max says, "Come on, guys. We can do this. We just gotta push a little harder. And go..." What is that? What does All Might say? Wait a minute. I have an idea. He then turns back to normal and he shrinks down, and though the Nomus were still on top of him, he then yelled "Dino out," and as he returned back to his Dino form, the sort of force that his body used as he went big, he then roared loudly to the skies as he telepathically said to his team, "Go plus ultra!" He managed to get the Nomus off of him, and he quickly ushered towards Fiona, and he assisted her in her situation, and they took the Nomus down. He then assisted Roger and Caruso, And they managed to even help Buzz get from getting overwhelmed from the Nomus that were trying to bring him down. And by the end of the fight, they were just barely successful, but the Nomus were down and they were still standing, so that is successful. The news helicopter caught all of this on camera, and the reporter mentions that the day was saved thanks to a bunch of prehistoric dinosaurs, like the UA High student Izuku Midoriya. There is a T-Rex down there, but it doesn't quite look like him. The team stop, and they took a well-deserved breath, and Max congratulates them, and he even mentions how proud he is of them that they kept on fighting. But the job was far from over, such as checking for civilians. Caruso, Roger, you guys go check the cars and make sure that people are okay. Fiona, you and me, we're going to go check around for injureds. Buzz, you take to the skies and see if you could find any more people who need help, or if you spot any more of those monster thingies. They all then break up and they say, yes, sir. And they do find injured people and they do call ambulances. And as Buzz was taking to the sky, he noticed that there was some conflict going on in an alleyway. A man with a red scarf covering his face who was armed to the teeth with blades around his body. There was a man who looked native on the ground bleeding. Buzz informed the team of the situation, and he dives in nose first. He squawks at the man, and the man was confused and he was scared, like, what the hell? What the hell is that thing? As he steps back, he then trips and he falls. The flying creature then picked up his victim with its talons, and he started flying away. The man then retaliated by throwing a knife, gashing this thing's wings, causing it to bleed and a little bit of its blood to be on his blade. He then quickly retrieves the blade and he licks it, paralyzing the creature, making it come back down to the ground. Buzz, thinking to himself, what's going on? I can't move. Guys, help! I'm in an alleyway. Quick! They try to find him as quick as they could, and as he's waiting, the man starts approaching him. He tries to contemplate what just happened and what is this thing. Then his thoughts were interrupted when he saw that his victim native was slowly able to move. He then quickly tried to bring his sword down to finish the job, but then Buzz then used his wing flesh to use it as a shield to protect native. He looked at Buzz and Buzz looked back at him. It's an eerie silence for a moment, but then Stain heard a faint growling noise just behind him. He slowly turns his head, and there he sees a giant two-legged lizard creature thing. It was staring at him with its giant red eyes. It was ginormous, it was angry, and Stain could feel the furious anger flowing throughout it. Before he could contemplate, the T-Rex then roared and it lunged itself at Stain with all of its might. The ground started shaking and Stain ran away out of fear. He then runs for the opposite end of the alleyway looking to escape, but before he could even make it, a giant Triceratops stopped him in his tracks. It roared at him, and it runs in his direction. Stain's heart nearly stopped from that, but then it started beating really fast. He then started climbing the walls of the alleyway. Before he could even reach the top, he was then met with a Spinosaurus and a Stegosaurus on the roof just staring right at him. He then screams and he lets go of the building and he falls to the ground, but then Max manages to catch him with his head and puts Stain on the ground gently. Stain then lays on the ground and these monsters staring right at him, he could just see the furiousness in their eyes, and their teeth were sharp. His heart couldn't take it anymore. He was having a panic attack, and he thought that he was going to die right there, and he curled into a ball. Someone save me! Excuse me. I got a little bit too in character there. Really, the Dino Squad was just staring at him in confusion, and Roger says, "So, this is the guy that the people of Japan called the hero killer? I was kind of expecting more." Fiona says, "My guess is that he probably has herpetophobia. Sort of fear against lizards, I think. Anyway, Buzz, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm slowly able to move again. I'm not entirely sure what that was, but I think that might be his quirk or something." And the people rejoice, but they weren't able to tell who exactly stopped Stain, because they disappeared before anyone could even see who they really are. Well, except Native, but the Dino Squad asked them to keep their identity a secret for them. The reporter then said, "The day is saved thanks to the group of dinosaurs, and though we may not know who they truly are, just duly note that this city is thanking you." It's the next day, and everyone has regrouped at the library, and everyone was happy that Stain was captured, even Ida the most. Before they pick up where they left off, Ida does go on to tell them that the doctor said that his brother is doing much better now, and he thanks the Dino Squad for doing what they did. To which Buzz would translate what he said back to his friends, and they would actually say, "You're welcome" in Japanese. Koji goes on to announce that the cockatoos did mention that they did spot a giant secret hatch that opened from underneath the sandy pits. So therefore, the rumors are true. The PSC, that is a true group of people. And now they know where Izuku is. Okay, now they're thinking about what are they going to do with this information. And the first thing that comes to their thought is that they should probably inform Mrs. Midoriya. After all, that is Izuku's mother, after all. She deserves to know. But just as they were going to pick up the phone and call her, the TV news turned on. It was urgent news. The Public Safety Commission has been destroyed. Bodies were found, but only one body wasn't found, and they assumed that the body was disintegrated. Everyone's face was in bewilderment and in disbelief. "What? What happened?" said Froppy. Let's rewind a day back over at Izuku, where the day of the breakout occurred. Izuku was being escorted to a lab for another experiment, but then, suddenly, the alarms went off. Flashing lights were seen and sirens were heard, and the intercom activated with Kane. Izuku heard his voice, saying, "Izuku, go berserk now and meet us in the cafeteria." Izuku, with all his might, punches the guards into a wall, leaving a dent shape of themselves in the walls like a cartoon character. Izuku then yelled, "Dino out!" and he turns into his dinosaur form. And he starts rampaging through the PSC Foundation until he busted down a wall that led to the cafeteria where he was attacked. Everyone was there. Everyone looked at him with fear and backed away. Kane came out and yelled at Izuku that it's okay and that their way out is through that way, which is a giant door. Kane would tell Izuku that he needs him to bust down those doors so that they can make it up to the exit, because they were underground. Dino Deku nods his head, and he gets a running start, and he breaks down their securities, and everyone follows behind him, running into obstacles, such as guards, turrets, guns, electrical attacks, batons, anything you think of. Izuku managed to break through it. As they run for what felt like hours, they finally reach the exit, but unfortunately, it was a metal door and it was 10 feet thick. And Izuku would not be able to break through it or break it open, even with the full power of One for All. Damn it, Kane, I can't break down this door. It's too thick. Don't worry, I have the key card right here. It opens with that terminal over there. Everybody, get ready. Freedom is just a few steps away. He then runs over to the terminal and he tries to scan the card, but all the power in the vicinity powers off and the backup generator turns on. The intercom powers on with the CEO of this facility telling the kids that he has turned off the power and demands that they all return to their cells. But they all band together and they attack the door, desperately trying to break free. Like they came this far. They were not ready to give up yet. They were going to do everything they could to get out of this place so that anyone and everyone could hear their story about what they've been through and what these heroes and what these people who are so-called trying to help the heroes doing to them. Suddenly, the CEO started screaming over the intercom. What? What the hell is that? No, stay back. No, not like this. Not like this. His screams were then covered by a velociraptor roar. Everyone was confused and they stopped. And suddenly, Dino Deku heard the familiar voice over the intercom. Hello there, Izuku. How are you holding up? Everyone looks at Dino Deku like, you know this man? Velocity says, if I were all of you, I'd stand away from the door. Suddenly, Izuku heard what sounded like beeping from the other side of the door, and he quickly yells at everyone to get back, and he uses himself as a shield to protect everyone. The fiery explosion from the door caused everyone to fly backwards a few feet. Izuku's vision was blurry, his ears were ringing, and he couldn't contemplate. His head hurt a lot from that explosion. One by one, soldiers entered the facility with guns aimed at the other kids. The light of the sun was glimmering through the now open doorway. Izuku looked over, and he sees Kane. He was badly injured, he was bleeding a lot, and he saw that his right arm was missing. The light of the sun illuminating the room. Dino Deku was then snared in a giant net trap. He found himself being dragged away. No! Wait! They're hurt! They need help! Suddenly, Izuku's ears caught the sound of gunfire. He looks and he sees Victor's henchmen were gunning down the other kids. No! Stop! What are you doing? Stop! Before they take out Kane, he reaches towards Dino Deku with his remaining hand, and he says, the sun. Izuku watches as Kane was then shot dead. Time slows down for Dino Deku. He couldn't hear, he couldn't think, he couldn't breathe. Ooh, I can't breathe thinking about it. The only person in this place that protected him, that ever cared about him, that helped him stay in control was just killed in front of him. It was at that moment that the entity inside Izuku took over. And at that moment, there was no more Izuku. There was only carnage. The dinosaur then busted through its restraints, and it goes after a revenge rampage, killing anyone who had the same symbol or even wore the same clothes as Dr. Veloci's henchmen. He ripped them to shreds with his teeth, and he ripped them apart in half with his bare dinosaur hands. The walls and even his own scales were drenched in the blood of his enemies. He lets out the loudest carnivorous roar that his throat could muster, and then suddenly, the dinosaur feels a sharp, stinging pain on his neck. He looks, and he sees a red velociraptor. He tries to shake it off, but it wouldn't let go of him. But then, just a few seconds later, the dinosaur then passes out on the floor. And the velociraptor reveals itself as Victor Veloci. Now hurry now, men. We have a few hours before he wakes up again. Surely you wouldn't want to be caught up in the carnage that this boy had made, would you? The henchman did not second guess anything that Victor just said, and they drag Izuku's body out as the light of the sun engulfs his entire body as we fade to black. And that's where I'm going to be leaving it. This story is surely about to have something in the end of it. I surely didn't know what to say right there, but I just found my wordings. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this. What if any of you made it to the end of this video? Consider yourselves #blessed, and you know what will make you really blessed? As if you hit that like button and share this video with a friend, and consider, as I already mentioned before, you're already #blessed. You know it. If you like this video, you already know you're definitely #blessed, and have a nice day. Goodbye.